So now that we got a header, we can continue with the part where users can enter a number which the computer should guess thereafter. And for this here in the app.js file below the header, I of course want to have the input area of the user. Now, just as before, I'll handle this in a separate component and not here in app.js to keep all components relatively lean. And we could create this component here in the components folder. That would not be wrong. But since I now will work on a component that essentially is responsible for everything we see on the screen besides the header, I treat this component as kind of a special component. I'll name it a screen and I'll store it in a screens folder because the finished game will essentially have 3 different screens, one for configuring and starting the game, one when the game is running, and one when the game is over. And I want to have these special components, which technically are totally normal components, but which fulfill a special purpose. I want to have them stored in a separate folder. And that's just my personal design decision here. You don't need to store them there. Technically, there is no reason to do it or not to do it. React Native simply doesn't care. So here I'll store it in there, and I'll name this startGameScreen.js to also make it really clear in the name that this is a special component to me. But as I said, technically it's a normal component, and therefore we import React from React, and we'll also import some things from React Native, of course. And we can already tell that we'll certainly need a view because, well, you probably can't build any component. Well, you can, but not that many components which you can build without views. So we'll import the view here, and we'll definitely also need a style sheet for some styling, and we'll see what else we need. We'll certainly also need a text, I guess, so we can already add that. Now with this, I'll create a new constant here, startGameScreen, which is a functional component looking like this, where we'll have a styles object with style sheet create like this, and where I then export startGameScreen like that. And you could save this as kind of a template for any new component you add, because 90% of custom components you build in React Native look like this, basically. You import React, you import some stuff from React Native, you define your component. The name differs, of course. You have your styles object and you export it. That's pretty much always the same. So you could kind of save this as a template if you wanted to. I don't want to here though, so I'll just continue with working on the component itself. And the question now is, what do we render in this start game screen? How should it look like? In the end in there, I'll have a wrapping view surrounding my entire screen, because I think that kind of makes sense, allows us to set up some general styling. I'll again add a screen property here to this style sheet object, which I can do. It will not clash with the one in app.js. We could have also chosen different names. These two are simply not related because these are independent JavaScript objects in the end, managed in independent files. So we can repeat names here or choose different names. I'll go for a similar name here, name this screen, and set up some general styling for this surrounding view here. The general styling is that I set this to flex 1 so that it takes all the space it can get, which means that since I will add it below the header, it will take all the space below the header, both vertically and horizontally. And besides this, I also want to add some padding here of 10 so that the content doesn't sit directly on the edges of this screen, but there is some spacing to the left, right, top, and bottom. And I'll add align items center. Keep in mind that every view by default uses flexbox and by default uses flex direction column. Align items positions items along the cross-axis. So since the default direction is column, the cross-axis is left to right. So it's a horizontal axis. So this will align items in the center horizontally, but not vertically. There we use the default of justify content flex start. But since I use the default, I don't need to set it. So we'll just leave it as it is here. And now assign this style here to this view. And auto formatting closed my tag here, which I of course don't want to do. So let me revert this. And now we have that view for our game screen. Now to see where it works, I'll just output some text here, the game screen, just some dummy placeholder. Reformat that, and now in app.js, let's use that screen by importing game start game screen from the screens folder, and there start game screen, and then simply add it here. Like this. If we save this, we see the game screen here and also on Android. So this works. We're using this second separate component, which we'll now use as a full screen component basically, or almost full screen, the part below the header in the end.